clinical and immunologic consequences of HIV-1 infection. When we talk about HIV infection, the most commonly used test is for presence of antibodies which are directed against proteins of HIV-1. The HIV-1 infection, the CD4 T cells, they are being infected, and the mode of infection which is taking place in the case of CD4 T cells, this side we will be discussing in the next lecture. But today I am going to talk about the appearance of infected individuals, the serum of the infected individuals, showing the presence of antibodies in the first 3 months of the infection. The individual is said to have a seropositive for HIV-1 in this case. And after the precise course of HIV-1 infection, the disease varies differently in different patients, and it has been categorized into 3 types: category A, B, and C. Usually what is observed that the course of HIV infection begins with no detectable HIV-1 antibodies or viruses and progresses to full AIDS syndrome. Diagnosis of this has shown that the infection with HIV, that is presence of antibodies or viruses in the blood, it diminishes the number of CD4 T cells, or it impairs or absence of delayed hypersensitivity reactions, and even the occurrence of opportunistic infections is also seen. Patients with AIDS, generally they are succumb to tuberculosis, pneumonia, severe wasting diarrhea, or various malignancies. The first overt indication of AIDS was opportunistic infection with fungus Candida albicans, which in this case you will see the sores in the mouth, and in case of women there is a vulvovaginal yeast infection. There is a persistent cough infection of the lungs, and it is an indicator. There is a rising level of circulating HIV-1 viruses in the plasma, and there is a drop in the number of CD4 T cells, as the figure is showing that the initial phases in the first few weeks the HIV viral load increases, and you can also observe the fall of the CD4 T cells. But when the AIDS syndrome is the AIDS syndrome is there, the viral load in the blood, that is the HIV RNA copies in the plasma, which you see over here, they will rise in the later stages of the AIDS patient. The best way to find out the viral load was PCR-assay method, which was used, and it played a major role in the determination of the patient's status and prognosis. Even the level of virus in the circulation, the blood circulation is stable. Large amount of viruses, they are produced in infected CD4 cells. As many as 10 raised to power 9 virions, they are released every day, and they are continually infecting and destroying the additional host T cells. We talk about the acute phase and the chronic phase. In case of acute phase, that is in the early stages of infection, there are immunological abnormalities which have been observed. These immunological abnormalities observed, they have been classified into stage 1, that is early stage, stage 2, that is the later stage. If you talk of lymph node structure, that is the abnormality which is taking place in the lymph node structure. Earlier you will see the infection and destruction of dendritic cells, but in later stages you will see that there is a loss of follicular dendritic cells, germinal centers, and the inability of the antigens or sport activation of T and B cells. So there is inability to trap the antigen T and B cells in the later stages. Similarly, if you talk about the helper cells, the T helper cells, in early stages, no proliferative response to specific antigen is observed. But in later cases, there is a decrease in T helper cell numbers, and there is no response to T cell mutagens as well. When you talk of antibody productions, in earlier stages there is antibody production, that is there is enhanced non-specific immunoglobulin G and immunoglobulin A production, but there is a reduced immunoglobulin M synthesis. In later stages, there is no detectable anti-HIV antibodies in some of the patients, and there is no proliferation of the B cells specific for HIV-1. Cytokine productions. If you increase the level of, there is an increased level of cytokine production in the early stages, but in later stages there is a shift from Th1 subset to Th2 subset. Delayed hypersensitivity is seen. Cytotoxicity T cells are seen which show normal activity in the early stages, but in later stages there is an impaired ability to generate cytotoxic T lymphocytes. So not only depletion of CD4 cells but other immunological consequences can be measured to HIV infected individuals during the progression of the AIDS. This is the passage of HIV between T cells and the dendritic cells which we are seeing. Now, if we talk about the mode of entry of the virus into the host cell, the first step in HIV infection is the viral attachment and entry into the target cell. HIV-1 infects T cells that carry the CD4 antigens on their surface, and they will infect monocytes and other cells that have CD4 on their surface. The presence of CD4 is due to high affinity interaction between envelope protein of HIV-1 and surface CD4. The virus binds to the CD4 and cell surface, and this attraction alone is not sufficient for the entry of the virus into the cell. It requires a co-receptors on T cells and monocytes also. So the infection of T cell is assisted by T cell co-receptors, that is CXCR4 in case of T cells, and CCR5 in case of monocytes or macrophages. So these co-receptors, they are also required along with the CD4. In the figure you can see that after the virus has entered the cell, the RNA genome of the virus is reverse transcribed and a complementary DNA copy integrates into the host genome. The integrated provirus, it is transcribed and the various viral RNA messages spliced, translated into proteins along with a complete new copy of an RNA genome, which are used to form new viral particles. The discovery of these co-receptors CXCR4 and CCR5, which are serving as co-receptors for HIV-1 on T cells and macrophages, there are certain strains of HIV-1 which will infect T cells, that is T-tropic strains, while others prefer macrophages, that is M-tropic strains. A-tropic strains, it uses CXCR4 co-receptor, and it has been seen that apart from whereas the M-tropic strains, they uses CCR5. It has been seen that other than the co-receptors, the strains, they also require there's a role of cytokines and chemokines in the viral replication. Chemokines, they have a negative effect on virus replication, and pro-inflammatory cytokines, they have a positive effect. When we talk about HIV co-receptors, CCR5 for T-tropic strains and CXCR4 for T-tropic strains and CCR5 for M-tropic strains, they function as receptors for chemokines. So the receptors, they can bind simultaneously to the virus, that is HIV-1, and to the chemokine ligand. So there is a competition for receptor between the virus and the ligand, and the chemokine, it can block the viral entry into the host cell. Whereas the pro-inflammatory cytokines, they induce greater expression of the chemokine receptors on the cell surface, making the cells more susceptible to viral entry. HIV-1 infection of T cells with certain strain of viruses leads to formation of giant cells, which are called as syncytia. These are formed by fusion of group of cells there is a formation of fusion of group of cells caused by the interaction of the viral envelope protein GP120, which is on the surface of the infected cells with CD4, and co-receptors on the surface of the other cells infected. After the initial binding, the cell adhesion molecules, there is the action of cell adhesion molecules, that is the welding of the cells takes place, and multinucleated mass is being formed, which is characterized as a multinucleated mass, and it is a ballooning membrane which eventually bursts. And this formation of syncytia, these can be blocked by the antibodies to some of the epitopes of the CD4 molecule by soluble forms of CD4 molecule, and by antibodies of cell adhesion molecules. So by the antibodies of the CD4 molecule epitopes, antibodies to some of the epitopes of the CD4 molecule, and by antibodies to cell adhesion molecules. Individual isolates of HIV-1 differ in their ability to produce or to induce syncytia formation. Isolates of HIV-1 strains, they are from different sources. They were classified as syncytia inducing and non-symptom inducing. That is SI inducing and non-SI and NSI. So the strains, the isolates, they were classified as SI and NSI. And in most cases, these differences, they were correlated with the ability of the virus to infect T cells or macrophages. The T-tropic strains, they were SI, whereas M-tropic strains, they were NSI. And more recently, classification of HIV-1, this is based on the co-receptor of the virus uses. There is good but no absolute correlation between the use of CXCR4, which is present on T cells, and having the SI ability. The NSI strains, they use CCR5, which is present on monocytes. The viral envelope protein GP120, a region called V3 loop has been identified, and this plays a very important role in the choice of receptors by the virus. A single amino acid difference in this region of GP120 is sufficient to determine which receptor will be used. Now, when we look at this, the first thing which comes to our mind is the therapeutic agents which can be there to combat AIDS. The therapeutic agents, they can be, as we have studied the life cycle of HIV, the susceptible points which can be blocked by pharmaceutical agents are two. First is the reverse transcriptase enzyme and second is the protease enzyme. Reverse transcriptase, which converts viral RNA to complementary DNA, and several drugs, they are being used as the reverse transcriptase inhibitors. So if you block the viral replication, it will help to stop the precursor proteins which are cleaved into units needed for construction of new virions, and this step is very specific. It will be requiring viral protease enzyme, which can be inhibited by chemical agents. So the replication of the virus and the second stage, that is a viral replication, wherein the blocking of the precursor proteins which are cleaved into the new units for construction of new mature virion, wherein the viral protease enzyme is playing an important role. Some antiretroviral drugs, they are being reported, for example zidovudine or AZT, which is used as a compound which inhibits reverse transcription. Now, AZT or zidovudine is a nucleoside analog, and it will stop the growing complementary DNA chain of the retroviruses and terminates the chain. It is effective in some individuals but not in all the individuals, so its efficacy is limited. Secondly, it is having very adverse side effects because the resistant viral mutants develop in treated patients. As I told you, the rate of replication of this virus is very high. 10 raised to power 9 viruses per day, they are being produced and they are affecting new host cells. Secondly, if you administer the zidovudine, it not only inhibits the HIV-1 reverse transcriptase enzyme, but it also interferes with the human DNA polymerase. So, if you take zidovudine into the DNA of the host cell, it kills them. So the precursors of the RBCs, they are especially sensitive to the zidovudines. It causes anemia in addition to other side effects. In addition to drugs such as zidovudine, which interfere with reverse transcription by inserting a new nucleoside analog into the growing complementary DNA chain, there are also other drugs like nevirapine, which inhibit the action of reverse transcriptase enzyme. The second class of protease inhibitors, they are being used in conjunction with the nucleoside analogs like zidovudine or nevirapine. Nevirapine, it is a non-nucleoside analog, and although it has hepatotoxic effect associated with it. So in the current treatment, the AIDS combination therapy was used, which was called as HART, that is highly active antiretroviral therapy, in which there was a combination of two nucleoside analogues and one protease inhibitors. This strategy helped us to overcome the ability of virus to rapidly produce mutants that are drug resistant. The success of HART in treating AIDS had opened various discussions, and mostly AIDS experts, they were not convinced that it is possible because there was a persistent latent infected CD4 T cells and macrophages which could serve as reservoir of infections if the provirus should be activated. The moment the provirus is activated, they will act as infectious agents. Even a viral load beneath the level of the detection by the PCR assays, the immune system may not recover sufficiently to clear the virus. To clear the virus in a situation that it does not replicate again in response to any of the activation signals. Additionally, the drugs which were used, they are in other various stages of development. One class of drugs that appears promising are those that interfere with integration of viral DNA into the host genomes. Other being considered act at the stage of viral attachment to the host cell. It should be stressed that the development of any drug to the point at which it can be used for patient is a long and very arduous procedure. The drugs pass rigorous tests for safety and efficacy, and a small fraction of those that receive initial considerations. So the vaccine development to prevent AIDS was there, as the expenses for heart treatment were very high, that is $15,000 per year. That was also there. Even if the virus was eradicated, the individuals treated with this therapy, it will not greatly influence the epidemic in the developing countries, which include the majority of AIDS victims. Why AIDS does not fit the paradigm of classic vaccine is that most of the vaccines, they mimic the natural state of infection, and those recovered from most diseases are immune for subsequent attacks. The infection by HIV-1 and the immunodeficiency syndrome flourishes even in the presence of circulating antibodies directed against proteins of the virus. So this progression of the disease even continues even when there are the antibodies being produced. Secondly, the long-term non-progressors, the period of infection without disease is longer. The exact state of immunity is in the individual is not clear, so it's very difficult to duplicate for vaccine development. Secondly, the vaccines prevent the disease, not the infection. So eradication of a retrovirus is not a simple matter. Clearance of retrovirus, difficult goal for vaccine. Every copy of the virus and every infected cell, every infected copy of the virus and every infected cell, it includes the latently infected period, which must be eradicated from the host. However, without complete eradication, HIV vaccine may benefit the infected individuals only. Therefore, such a vaccine would help to control the spread of infection and not able to eliminate the infection. Most of the vaccines, thirdly, the most vaccines, they protect for years against the viruses. But this is not the case over here, because the instability of the genome differentiates HIV-1 from most of the other viruses for which successful vaccines have been developed. The influenza virus, it has more than 100 subtypes, right? The rhinoviruses, which is having more than 100 subtypes. It's no effective vaccine has been developed against this. HIV-1, which shows variation in most of the viral antigens, and the rate of replication is very high per day. This variability, along with the high rate of replication, it allows the production of viruses with multiple mutations, and some of these may escape from the immunity. So putting up these arguments, we can say that vaccines prevent infection. Vaccines which prevent infection by viruses, those viruses which have little variations. The majority of successful vaccines, they are either killed vaccines, heat-killed vaccines, or live attenuated vaccines. HIV-1 killed vaccines, they do not retain antigenicity. And the use of a live retroviruses vaccines, it raises the safety issues. It is believed that the immunity raised will clear the vaccine virus from the host. This cannot be done easily with retroviruses, which integrates into the host genome. So, you see the provirus, which is there, which stays in the latent phase, but moment the activation proteins or moment it is activated, it will cause the infection. For most viruses, the frequency of exposure to infection is rare or seasonal, but in this case, the infection, it is taking place through intravenous drug users, and it is taking place frequently and potentially in large doses. Then comes most vaccines protect against respiratory or gastrointestinal tract, whereas majority of HIV infections, they are taking place through the genital tract. Development of vaccines through clinical trials relies upon the animal experiment models, which is not there in this case. As chimpanzees, they do not HIV, they do not get HIV infected most of the times. And as I told you, the SCID model was developed wherein the thymus was induced into mouse so that the antiretroviral drugs can be tested, and they were found that which of the antiretroviral drugs can be used. Vaccine strategies which are under study, it includes anti-HIV antibodies, cellular responses, and antibody and cellular responses. So far, it has been, AIDS vaccine is not a simple exercise, and classic vaccine development has not taken place, although there are trials going on, and hopefully in near future we will have a AIDS vaccine developed. Thank you. Parvez sir,